Let me take you straight into the heart of this idea, because before we go any further, you need to understand the weight of what this research really uncovered. We often think that our lives are defined by the big moments, the career change, the relationship, the breakthrough, the failure. But the truth that this one study reveals is far more subtle and far more profound. What shapes the trajectory of your entire existence is not the monumental decisions you make once a decade, but the microscopic ones you make hundreds of times a day without even realizing it. Researchers set out to understand what separates people who feel deeply fulfilled and successful from those who feel stuck, restless, or lost. And what they discovered wasn't a difference in talent, opportunity, or even intelligence. It was a difference in patterns, the patterns of thought, the patterns of behavior, the patterns of response that repeat over and over again until they become the architecture of a person's life. We underestimate the power of these patterns because they're so small, so seemingly insignificant, that we assume they can't possibly be the difference between a life that thrives and a life that stagnates. But they are. Here's the thing most people miss: your life is not built in the grand moments. It's built in the quiet repetitions. The way you start your morning, the way you talk to yourself when you fail, the way you decide or don't decide to speak up in a meeting. Those little choices compound, just like interest, until they define the story of your life. And this study proved that if you change the micro, you change the macro. Shift the small, and the big begins to shift with it. What's even more fascinating is how much of this happens beneath the surface of awareness. Most of us believe we're in control of our decisions, but research shows that up to 95% of what we do each day is governed by unconscious habits and automatic responses. Think about that. That means the version of your life you're living right now is mostly the result of patterns you didn't consciously choose. Patterns that were shaped by your past, by your environment, by what you repeatedly tolerated. And unless you bring them into the light, they'll continue shaping your future without your permission. This is where the study becomes liberating, because it means you don't need a radical external change to alter the course of your life. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow, move across the world, or have everything figured out. You need to become aware of the patterns you're living by and shift them one deliberate decision at a time. And once you do, the ripple effects are extraordinary, because small doesn't mean insignificant. Small means foundational. A 1-degree shift in direction doesn't look like much at the start, but over time, it takes you to a completely different destination. This is why I always say you're closer to a breakthrough than you think. It's not some massive leap that will change everything. It's the consistent micro movements you commit to each day. This research confirms that the life you want is not hiding in some distant future. It's being built right now in the way you think, the way you choose, the way you respond in the smallest of moments. So if you feel stuck, remember this: your life is not defined by where you are. It's defined by the direction of the patterns you're reinforcing. And the moment you decide to change even one of them, you begin rewriting everything. Because if the small things can shape your life without your awareness, imagine what they can do with your intention. The most powerful truth this study reveals is this: the difference between the life you're living and the life you're capable of is not a mountain. It's a handful of tiny, deliberate shifts, and they're all within your reach. If there's one truth that most people go their entire lives without fully grasping, it's this: your thoughts are not just ideas floating through your head. They are the architects of your reality. That's not poetic language, it's scientific fact. The same study that revealed the power of micro decisions also uncovered something even more profound. The way you think doesn't just influence how you feel about life. It literally shapes the life you end up living. Your thoughts are not harmless. They are creative, they're sculptors carving out the future you will eventually inhabit. Think about it. Every decision you've ever made started first as a thought. Every risk you took, every dream you pursued, every fear you surrendered to, all of it began in your mind. And yet we spend so little time paying attention to the quality of those thoughts. We treat them like background noise. But here's the truth: the stories you repeat in your head day after day become the blueprint your brain uses to build your reality. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated thought patterns. And the research is clear: what you consistently think about changes the structure and function of your brain, which changes how you perceive the world, which changes how you act in it, which changes the outcomes you experience. It's a cascade effect. A person who repeatedly thinks, "I'm capable, I'm resourceful, I'll figure this out," literally builds neural pathways that make them more likely to take action, seek solutions, and persist through obstacles. Meanwhile, someone who repeatedly thinks, "I'm not good enough, I always fail, nothing ever works out," builds a different set of pathways. Ones that make them hesitate, pull back, and sabotage their own progress. It's not magic, it's biology. And yet, we often talk about our thoughts as if they're irrelevant, as if they're just commentary on reality. They're not, they create reality. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Your thoughts don't just shape your actions. They shape your identity. The human mind is wired to stay consistent with the stories it believes. If you tell yourself you're not disciplined, you'll subconsciously act in ways that prove that story true. If you tell yourself you're resilient, your brain will start scanning for evidence to confirm it. Over time, those repeated narratives become your self-concept. And your self-concept is the ceiling on what you believe is possible for you. This is why two people can be handed the same opportunity and one thrives while the other withers. It's not luck, it's not talent, it's the invisible dialogue running inside their heads. And once you understand that, once you realize you are not a passive observer of your thoughts, but the author of them, everything changes. You stop accepting every thought as truth, and you start interrogating them. You start choosing them. And that's where the real power begins. But let me be clear. This isn't about plastering fake positivity over your reality. It's not about telling yourself lies. It's about deliberately cultivating thoughts that serve your growth, that expand what's possible, that align with the life you want to create. And the more you repeat them, the more your brain believes them, the more your actions reflect them, and the more your external world starts to mirror them back to you. This is why awareness is everything. You cannot change what you do not notice. The moment you become aware of the stories you're telling yourself about who you are, what's possible, and what you deserve, you regain the power to rewrite them. And when you rewrite them, you are no longer at the mercy of your past conditioning. You become the designer of your future. So here's the truth I want you to walk away with. Your thoughts are not just commentary. They are commands. They instruct your brain on how to build your life. And the moment you decide to change the conversation happening in your mind is the moment you begin to change the reality unfolding around you. Now that we've looked at how small decisions and dominant thoughts shape your reality, there's another layer to this that the research makes impossible to ignore. And it's the one most people underestimate the most. Your life isn't just built by the choices you make once in a while or the stories you tell yourself in your head. It's built by the patterns you repeat so consistently that they stop feeling like choices at all. We call them habits, but they're much more than that. They're invisible systems running your life day in and day out, often without your awareness. And if you don't understand how they work, they will quietly determine who you become. Here's what the science shows. Up to 95% of your daily actions are habitual. That means most of what you do, how you respond, what you avoid, and even how you think isn't the result of conscious decision making. It's the product of deeply ingrained patterns. These patterns follow a simple but powerful structure psychologists call the habit loop. Cue, routine, reward. A cue triggers a behavior, the behavior produces a result, and that result reinforces the behavior. Over time, this loop becomes automatic. You don't have to think about it, your brain just runs the program. And here's the catch. Your life is nothing more than the sum of those programs running over and over again. This is why willpower and motivation alone rarely create lasting change. If you're relying on raw discipline to transform your life, you're fighting against the most powerful force in human behavior, your own wiring. The secret isn't to push harder, it's to reprogram the loop. It's to identify the cues that spark unhelpful habits, replace the routine with something that serves you, and design rewards that reinforce the change. When you do that consistently, your brain adapts. The new pattern becomes automatic, and what once felt like effort becomes second nature. Think about how this applies to every area of life. Let's say you want to become more confident. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly feel confident. Confidence is a byproduct of repeated actions. Speaking up even when you're nervous, following through on commitments, taking small risks. Do that often enough and those actions stop being scary. They become who you are. Or consider success in your career. It's not about massive breakthroughs, it's about showing up prepared, delivering value, building relationships. Day after day until the pattern creates momentum that becomes unstoppable. The beauty of this is that once you understand how the loop works, you realize that your future is not built on massive, dramatic decisions. It's built on 1,000 tiny behaviors practiced over and over until they become your default. And that means you have far more control than you think. You don't need to fix everything overnight. You just need to pick one loop, one small pattern, and start shifting it intentionally. Because once you prove to your brain that change is possible on a small scale, it becomes easier to apply that same process to bigger areas of your life. And there's a deeper truth here too. Habits don't just shape what you do, they shape who you believe you are. Every time you follow through on a new behavior, you cast a vote for a new identity. Do it often enough and your self-concept changes. You stop trying to become disciplined and start seeing yourself as a disciplined person. You stop trying to act confident and start believing that confidence is part of your nature. And once that identity shift happens, the behavior sustains itself without struggle. So if you want to change your life, stop obsessing over outcomes and start obsessing over the loops that create them. Examine the patterns that define your days, not the dramatic decisions, but the quiet, repeated ones. Because your habits are not just what you do, they are who you become. Here's where it all comes together. Because once you understand that your life is shaped by small decisions, that your thoughts architect your reality, and that your habits quietly build your future, you arrive at the most empowering realization of all: nothing about your story is fixed. The research behind this idea doesn't just describe how people change, it proves that change is always possible. And that means no matter where you are right now, no matter how many mistakes you've made or how deeply your patterns run, you can rewrite the story of your life. Most people never grasp this because they're trapped inside a myth. The myth that their identity is permanent. They think This is just who I am. I'm not disciplined. I'm not confident. I'm not the kind of person who succeeds. And because they believe those stories, they stop trying. But identity isn't static. It's a collection of stories you've repeated to yourself over time, and stories can be rewritten. The brain is not a fixed machine. It's plastic, adaptable, constantly reshaping itself based on what you feed it. That means your future isn't determined by your past. It's determined by what you choose to believe and practice now. The power in this research is that it gives you permission to start small. You don't need to reinvent everything overnight. You don't need to know exactly where the path leads. You just need to take one intentional step in a new direction, and then another, and let those steps begin to build momentum. Because the truth is, transformation rarely happens in a single moment. It happens in the steady accumulation of choices that align with the life you want, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it challenges who you used to be. And here's something most people don't realize: change always begins in identity, not in outcome. If you focus only on the result, I want to lose 20 pounds, I want to double my income, I want to be more confident, you'll struggle every time. But if you shift your focus to who you're becoming, I'm someone who takes care of my body, I'm someone who creates value, I'm someone who speaks with courage, your actions will begin to align naturally with that new identity, because the human mind is wired to act in ways that are consistent with who it believes it is. Change the identity and the behavior follows. This is why rewriting your story is so much more than motivation. It's liberation. It's the act of reclaiming authorship over your life. It's understanding that you are not your past. You are not your mistakes. You are not the version of you that settled or doubted or hesitated. You are the person who chooses what happens next. And every single day you wake up, you have that choice again. You can either repeat the next chapter of the same story you've been living, or you can pick up the pen and write something entirely new. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. Because every meaningful change in your life will require you to outgrow a part of yourself. Growth always demands that you let go of the old narrative so that a new one can emerge. But the discomfort is not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're evolving. So if there's one thing you take from this study, let it be this: your life is not a script carved in stone. It's a draft, editable, flexible, ready to be rewritten as many times as it takes. And the moment you decide to stop living by the limits of your past and start living by the possibility of your future, everything changes.